Deep beneath the streets of Paris lies a creepy, dark world. An underground surrounded by the bones of over 6 million souls. The Paris Catacombs is full of centuries of death and mystery. What lies beneath the famous city is far more terrifying than you could ever imagine. This is one of history's most chilling and haunted locations. The Paris Catacombs, established in 1786, are located underneath Paris, France. They were originally limestone quarries, but unfortunately graveyards, like Les Innocents, became full. Due to the graveyards becoming full, this led to unsanitary conditions and health risks. People were concerned, so they transformed the limestone quarries into a burial site in 1786, now called the Paris Catacombs. The catacombs stretches over 200 miles of tunnels and only 1.5 kilometers are open to the public. Inside, bones are arranged in stacks and patterns, creating a gruesome yet tidy display. Walking through the tunnels of bones is like walking through forgotten souls. The main entrance is located near Place d'Enfert Rochereau. They started opening to the public in 1809, and there is a tour where you are offered a glimpse of this underground world and its history. As people explore the catacombs, they're not just exploring the gruesome historical site, they're exploring an underground full of legends and myths. One of the most eerie and unsettling legends of the Paris Catacombs is the vanishing explorers. Over the years, there has been many reports of people disappearing. Although some of these disappearances are due to the complex and nature of the tunnels, some legends suggest it's something more sinister and unexplainable. The urban legend says that explorers who venture far into the catacombs may encounter supernatural entities or evil forces, which can then cause them to become lost without a trace. Another chilling legend is the Phantom of the Catacombs. This is about a shadowy figure that is said to haunt the tunnels. The Phantom is said to be wearing a cloak and is a ghostly presence that apparently appears to lost explorers. Some stories suggest that the Phantom has evil intentions by causing explorers to become lost and put them in danger. This adds to the eerie, frightening experience of the catacombs. There are several disappearances that have happened in the catacombs. One of them is the 1990s disappearances. The 1990s disappearances in the Paris Catacombs is one of the most chilling true events linked to the underground. Two teenagers named Anthony and Thomas went into the catacombs for an unauthorized exploration, despite all the dangers a few urban explorers attempt this. They entered into areas of the catacombs that were not open for the public. The day of their entry is not documented. An intense search was carried out after their disappearance. Police, volunteers, and even experienced people who explore the catacombs all helped to find them. Despite all the searching, the two teenagers were never found. Some say that they may have become disoriented within the tunnels due to lack of light and any clear markings, and that they perished in the darkness. This incident remains unresolved and their bodies were never recovered. This adds to the creepiness of the catacombs. It also fuels legends and myths, which makes the place even scarier and be seen as a place where people can enter and never return. There is a film that brings these scary, dark tunnels to life, and it's called As Above, So Below. The film is not based on any specific disappearance, but it draws from the legends around the catacombs and that explorers enter and never return. A plague that brought fear and unimaginable horror to the world. It was more than an event. It was a nightmare that consumed cities. From 1347 to 1351, it swept across Europe, leaving behind nothing but terror and death. This is the Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, one of the deadliest pandemics in history. It all started in 1347, and this is the year that Europe would lose one-third of its population, around 25 million people. The Black Death originated in Central Asia. It was caused by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis. This bacteria lived in fleas which lived on rats. The plague spread through trade routes, particularly the Silk Road. The Silk Road was a network of trade routes connecting to Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. It was used for transporting goods. Merchants and travelers moved along these routes, which then allowed the plague to spread rapidly. Within months, entire communities were wiped out. People were baffled. They didn't understand what was happening. Fear consumed them as they watched their loved ones pass away. In medieval towns, the streets were unfortunately filled with death carts, which had bodies overflowing from them. People feared the air they breathed in. Families and villages were erased. The plague was taking over. The plague wiped many people out. But unfortunately, the symptoms were terrifying. Victims would first experience fever and chills, then they would have swollen lymph nodes. Death was then close by, within days, even hours. There was no cure or hope. The victims were quarantined, and some even abandoned. This pandemic wasn't just about a disease. It caused disruption across social, economic, and religions. The plague was seen as a punishment brought upon the world for its sins. This caused many people to question their faith, due to people believing the plague was a punishment for the world's sins. Some people turned to extreme religious practices. For example, the flagellants believed that self-punishment would make amends for the sins and stop the plague. Groups like this would walk through the towns, whipping themselves, hoping for God's forgiveness. While groups were doing this, others felt let down and disappointed with the church. Priests, monks, and nuns also were victims of the plague, which left people feeling abandoned by their spiritual leaders. The Black Death also caused Jews to be falsely accused of causing the plague. This sadly led to prosecution and massacres in parts of Europe. In some places, the plague killed so quickly that there wasn't enough people alive to bury the dead. Also, due to shortages of labor, proper burials were not possible. Graves were filled, and bodies began to be stacked, thrown into pits, left to rot. It gets worse, because the Black Death didn't just take lives, it affected the way we live. Fields were left abandoned, businesses destroyed, and even churches couldn't escape. Due to priests, monks, and nuns being victims, there was no one to attend the churches. They became empty and silent. The people survived, were left with a world which was forever changed. Towns and villages were empty. The economy was crumbled. They were also left with the fear that the plague would return, in which it did. The plague returned several times, but grateful none was as devastating as the first wave. The Black Death has left history with a reminder of how fragile life is in something so powerful and terrifying. The Black Death remains one of the most darkest moments in history. The stories of fear and mass death continue to be passed down throughout the ages, reminding us something as small as a flea can cause everything to come crashing down. A gloomy, dark, choking cloud fell upon the city of London. What makes things worse is that it wasn't just fog, it was something far worse. In December 1952, London faced something terrifying, which would change the city forever. London was engulfed with a deadly smog, It wasn't just a weather event, it was a catastrophe. Thousands of people would lose their lives in days. This is the story of the Great Smog of London, an environmental disaster that left the city in horror and chaos. Going back to December 1952, a period of cold weather settled over London. People started burning more coal than usual to keep warm. This then filled the air with thick smoke. At the same time, a natural weather condition called temperature inversion occurred. This trapped the polluted air close to the ground. As the days passed, the smoke mixed with the moisture in the air created a thick yellow-brown fog which consumed the air. Due to the thick fog, visibility dropped to almost zero in most areas. It was almost impossible for people to see more than a few feet in front of them. Everyone's daily routines were affected. Because of the visibility, transport was put on hold and had an impact on everything. But this wasn't the true horror. The true horror was the deadly effects which lays in the smog. The air was filled with sulfur dioxide and other harmful chemicals. This is toxic. People began coughing and desperate for air. Their lungs were burning from the poison within the air. Some people with respiratory problems, and the elderly and young, were very vulnerable. Due to all these people in need of desperate help, hospitals became overwhelmed. The smog lingered for 5 days, and an estimate of 4,000 people lost their lives. Unfortunately, this wasn't the end. Even though the fog cleared up, the amount of deaths climbed up to 12,000. These people suffered with illnesses which was brought on by the toxic air. The smog wasn't just an unfortunate event. It was brought on as a result from industrial pollution, poor air quality, and unchecked emissions. London was known for its fog, but this wasn't different. It wasn't just fog. This was a deadly combination of chemicals and smoke, filling the air with poison. The Great Smog affected people mentally. People became helpless and full of fear. They became trapped in their homes, unable to run from the deadly air outside. The chaos of cars colliding, people collapsing, and the death toll rising did not help the people. The government was slow to react, and by the time the smog had cleared, it was too late. The damage was done, and London was badly impacted. The government took action immediately after the disaster. The Clean Air Act of 1956 was passed to prevent anything like this happening again. The main aim of the act was to reduce air pollution and control the burning of coal, in which it did. It led to significant improvements in the air quality and protected public health from pollution. The Great Smog of London remains one of the worst environmental disasters in history. It also acts as a reminder of the deadly pollution and how fragile life can be in environments crisis. An abandoned ghost ship drifted silently across the ocean. A mystery that has puzzled experts for over a century. This is the creepy tale of the Mary Celeste, a ship with a fate that remains one of the greatest mystery in history. In December 1872, the Mary Celeste started its journey from New York, bound for Genoa, Italy. The ship was a 282-ton brigantine, and its trip should have been routine. However, what happened to this trip would confuse investors and create many theories. On December 4th, 1872, a British ship, DEI Gracia, stumbled across the Mary Celeste. It was 600 miles from east of the Azores. The ship was found drifting uncontrollably in the Atlantic Ocean. The ship was in a mess. The sails were partially set, and the lifeboat was missing. The crew were also nowhere to be found. The Mary Celeste was found abandoned. The cargo on board was apparently untouched. The missing lifeboat and the partially set sails could suggest the crew left in a hurry, but there was no visible signs of distress or violence, which leaves investigators confused. What made this mystery creepy is that the ship's state was in good condition despite being abandoned. The ship's log entries showed up until the day it was found. The last entry was dated November 25th, and it indicted that everything was normal. The ship's log included things such as daily entries, navigation details, and crew activities. Just like many mysteries, theories began to form about the crew disappearance. These theories range from piracy to supernatural encounters. One of the earliest theories was piracy. People suggested that maybe pirates attacked the Mary Celeste. However, this theory is unlikely due to their cargo and values being untouched. If it was due to pirates, then they would have likely stole everything. Another main theory was mutiny. It was suggested that the crew may have been mutinied. Mutiny is a rebellion against authority, so some say that the crew could have mutinied against Captain Benjamin Briggs. However, there is some downsides to this theory, as the captain had a good relationship with his crew, and there was also no signs of violence on board. One of the more reasonable theories is that the crew was in fear for their lives, so they abandoned the ship and took the lifeboat in desperate escape. Due to the Mary Celeste carrying barrels of denatured alcohol, which is highly flammable, it's been speculated that some of the barrels may have leaked, which could have caused toxic fumes, so the crew had no other option than to evacuate. Unfortunately, no trace of the lifeboat and crew were ever found. Despite all the investigations, no explanation has been found. The Mary Celeste was sent to Gibraltar and sold, but the mystery still remains. The Mary Celeste serves as a chilling reminder of the danger and mysteries at sea. The tale remains an intriguing and unsettling mystery that may never be solved. In the quiet early hours of a September morning, a small spark would ignite and consume an entire city. This is the horrifying story of the Great Fire of London, a disaster that would turn a city to ashes and leave people in shock and despair. It all started on September 2nd, 1666. The people of London were going about their days when the unthinkable happened. A fire started in a bakery on Pudding Lane. The bakery was owned by a man named Thomas Farriner. It was not long after midnight when a flame from an oven lost control. The fire grew and quickly spread through the bakery and into the narrow streets full of wooden houses. The city was overcrowded with timber buildings. The summer does not help the situation. It was a hot, long, and dry summer, which is good conditions for a catastrophic fire. The flames spread quick, consuming the city. Strong winds caused the fire to spread rapidly, taking down houses and businesses. Everything in its path was a target. The sky filled black with smoke as London burned. The heat from the fire became so intense that it started melting lead roofs from buildings. This then led to molten lead running through the city. Panic spread just as fast as the fire. People left their homes grabbing whatever possessions they could. People crowded the boats in the River Thames trying to escape the flames. The destruction became unstoppable. On the third day, the fire had destroyed 13,000 homes and 87 churches. The thing that made this disaster worse was that no one knew how to stop it. The firefighters had buckets of water, fire hooks, and fire breaks, which was very little compared to the fire. On September 6th, 4 days after the fire started, the fire was under control. Unfortunately, the damage was done and London was ruined. People were left homeless, jobless, and devastated. The Great Fire of London took very little lives, but the distraction was terrifying. The city was changed forever. 80% of the city was destroyed, and tens of thousands were left homeless and in fear. After the catastrophe, London had to rebuild. Everything became stricter. The building regulations, especially to prevent another disaster. The famous architect, Christopher Wren, helped redesign most of the city. The Great Fire also led to improvements within the fire safety. A fire insurance industry formed to help protect the community in case something similar happened again. The city learned from the Great Fire and came back stronger. The Great Fire of London is a chilling reminder of how a spark can quickly spread and lead to a catastrophe, changing history forever.